walk into this room at your own risk, because it leads to the future. Not a future that will be, but one that might be. This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one.
Doc, the bruise in your head. I know how that happened. You told me the whole story. You were standing on your toilet, and you were hanging a clock, and you fell, and you hit your head on the sink. And that's when you came up with the idea for the flux capacitor, which is what makes time travel possible.
Greetings, Planeteers, and welcome to Sci-Fi and More. I'm your host, Mike Cosmos, and in this week's episode, we will conquer the fantastical realm of alternate timelines developed by time travel, things that could be, things that are too outrageous to be, all in an is it possible alternate timeline conundrum. So let's dive right in and discover some mirror history. Science fiction storytellers for generations have created a rich history of time travel stories and lore that have not only supplied hours of pure entertainment on the big screen, novels, cartoons, and gaming, but also allows for our imagination to embrace new ideas that can be added to this rich lore with new and fantastic stories. One of these stories, which could be considered the godfather of time travel stories, or the master blueprint of the modern-day time travel experience, was The Time Machine, written by H.G. Wells and first published in 1895. It could be argued that The Time Machine set the tone for what time travel stories would evolve into as time continued to guide us through the future to the present day. In the modern era of time travel and alternate reality stories, we as viewers, readers, or gamers are treated to a lot of science fiction. While the obvious examples are out there like Back to the Future, which introduced us to Marty McFly riding through time in a tricked-out DeLorean and somehow managing to make 1955 his home away from home, to the Terminator series, which started in 1984 by sending robotic Terminators from an apocalyptic future where machines have risen and enslaved humanity, yet continuously keep getting sent back in time to 1984 to kill Sarah Connor, the mother of the future resistance leader before she could give birth to him, her son, John Connor, the future leader of the resistance that will lead humanity out of this bleak future by striking fear into both Skynet and the Terminators by defeating and overthrowing the future's mechanical overlords, all the way to altering their own timeline and creating their own alternate reality where Sarah Connor and the Terminator partner up in 1984 to defend 1984 from Skynet's attempts to keep sending additional Terminators that arrive from the future. This is a vastly different iteration than the original 1984 movie. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is currently taking us into the realm of all things possible with the multiverse in theaters and on Disney+, with shows like WandaVision, Loki, and the animated series What If, and on the big screen more recently with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, with the second Into the Spider-Verse on the horizon. But, not to be outdone, DC Comics, specifically the DC Extended Universe, is also getting in on all things reality changing with the upcoming Flash movie, which appears to, at least in part, tell the story of the Flashpoint Paradox series, which, at least in the comics, involves Flash traveling through time and, quote-unquote, breaking the universe, as Barry Allen, aka The Flash, points out in the trailer for the upcoming movie. You know what? All of that is great. But what I am really happy to see is that Warner Brothers and the DCEU found a way to bring this guy back. Isn't that going to be awesome? You know what? Nothing says a Flash movie quite like featuring Michael Keaton's Batman heavily in the trailer. Absolutely love that Michael Keaton is back 30 years later as Batman in the upcoming Flash movie. You see, Planeteers, wishes can come true. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that some of my favorite alternate realities and time travel adventures come from Star Trek. There are good and bad in this category that I could go on about for hours with an unwilling listener. However, we will just touch on it here, as we'll start with the good, which we saw on Star Trek The Original Series, Season 2, Episode 4, titled Mirror, Mirror, which aired originally on October 6, 1967. Honestly, in my opinion, to this day, that episode still stands up. I mean, is there anything cooler than seeing Spock with a beard stewing on some evil plots and plans to overthrow the Mirror Universe Captain Kirk and claim the ISS Enterprise for his own? I think not. Though this episode has nothing to do with time travel, it does introduce the Star Trek fandom to Star Trek's version of an altered reality by way of a parallel universe. Now, if I were going to point at a bad thing with time travel as it relates to Star Trek, it's that no matter what, Star Trek never seems to break or damage the timeline in any way. Oh, they do for a hot minute, but at the end of the day, everything gets resolved and life goes on like nothing happened. Now, when I say that's the bad, trust me, it's not bad for me. I'm a Star Trek fanboy, and I love all the time travel stories that Star Trek has made. The reality with a time travel story is, with all practicality, something will change. An alternate reality will happen, overwriting the existing timeline, giving rise to a new and different timeline, which any of us walking around would have no idea a change has occurred. It would almost be like reformatting a hard drive. And if we were to expand on this idea about the practicality of actually conducting time travel and the burden of having to worry if we could potentially change the timeline, or worse yet, cause a quantum temporal universal-wide implosion that would end the existence of everything everywhere. You know what? Don't worry about it. Never fear, Planeteers. Star Trek came up with a solution for this and raised the bar for this inevitability and gave humanity the best possible solution in the J.J. Abrams 2009 Star Trek reboot film. Ambassador Spock didn't just fall into a black hole, go back in time, meet his younger self, and change history. Well, he did. But instead of his time-traveling shenanigans in the past altering the future of the timeline, what he really did is created an alternate timeline, which allows for current shows like Star Trek Picard to operate in their own universe, the untouched Prime universe, and doesn't worry about Spock running around the past changing things up. Brilliant. So no more worries about how changing the past will affect the future. Now we know that the black hole creating red matter that Ambassador Spock was flying around with can completely break the laws of linear time and create its own independent alternate reality. And why did Star Trek do this? Simple. Because it's Star Trek and they can do whatever they want. Thank you, Ambassador Spock, for coming up with a solution to the time travel paradox that has plagued time travelers since H.G. Wells wrote The Time Machine. We salute you. Absolutely fantastic solution. And as we all know, science fiction writes the future. With all that in mind, let's take a look at our own potential mirror history and the implications we might expect, since we don't have any alternate reality making red matter to hang on to as we fall into a black hole that transports us to the past. In a time after the dinosaurs, but before the space race, the planet was thrown into upheaval as war was looming. In the late 1930s, fascism had begun to take hold in Europe, specifically in Germany. Still recovering from the devastating loss of World War I, rose a leader in Germany that would take control of the country and become one of the most dangerous threats the world had ever seen, making the intolerable seem tolerable, making atrocities seem necessary, making hate and discontent for others that were different than them seem to be okay and a staple of life. All the while, behind the scenes, developing plans and initiating programs and strategies to conquer the world. While historically, the Nazi Party rose to power and quickly tried to dominate Europe, they had global domination aspirations on their minds. The Nazis wanted not only to rule Europe, but had layers of plans built within layers of plans to achieve that goal. Behind the scenes, the Nazis were trying to be the world leaders in science, archaeology, and economic dominance. In an attempt to secure a future, the Nazi Party knew that their strength would come with the support of the people. So, in an attempt to garner support from the citizens of Germany that were still struggling from the devastating loss and economic depression of World War I, the Nazi Party needed a hook. They needed to win the support of the people so the people would support and endorse the Nazi vision. That hook came in the form of Hitler securing development plans with Volkswagen to develop the people's car. We know today that car as the Beetle or the Bug, an inexpensive family car that would give families of Germany the means to carry out the business of the day at a price that was affordable to all. Knowing that the support and the strength of the party would come from the support of the people, Adolf Hitler knew that as the leader of Nazi Germany, if he could provide the masses with an affordable solution to provide a family the much desired needs that they craved, he would essentially have an entire nation pledging to him. The People's Car gave the Nazis what they needed: national support and an economic infusion. Adolf Hitler had set up Volkswagen to be a state-owned company prior to World War II under the umbrella of the German Labor Front, which had been utilized through Volkswagen and the production of the People's Car to foster the Strength Through Joy program. That program had the singular mission to bridge the divide in classes and promote National Socialism. And you know what? The plan worked. That national and financial support was harnessed, and the Nazis leveraged that support and began to fund and develop multiple factions within the Nazi Party. Nazi scientists were pressed into service to begin development of new and never-seen technologies, the likes of which the planet had never seen. Under the directions of Joseph Goebbels, chief propagandist of the Nazi Party and Reich Minister of Propaganda, shadow technology development was greenlit to be conducted outside the public knowledge. One such technology, ever shrouded in mystery, was the Die Glock, or the Bell. This was a top-secret scientific technological device, a secret weapon, or Wunderwaffe, as it was known through the Nazi science and technology ranks. While on paper this project was overseen by Joseph Goebbels, the true head of the project had never been identified. What was this thing? This oddity of technology? Some theorize that it was a secret Nazi anti-gravity machine. Others theorize that the Nazis manufactured their own UFO to carry the Third Reich to the stars, to begin conquering new planetary bodies in our solar system in the name of the fatherland. While still another theory is that the Nazis created the world's first real-life time machine. Only one man, a shadowy figure cloaked in mystery, an unknown puppeteer of evil genius and fanatical motives, knew the true purpose of the bell. By the time the war had come to an end in 1945, the bell had mysteriously gone missing. As buried in secrecy as the project and its creator were, so too was its disappearance. Knowing the enormity of the threat of a rogue former Nazi scientist with maniacal ideologies could pose to the security of the United States, President Harry S. Truman mandated that the FBI and the newly formed CIA hunt down and track this phantom figure, bring him to justice, and recover all of his research. Between 1947 and early 1955, the FBI and the CIA seemed to be engaged in a fruitless effort yielding no results. No trace of this mystery scientist or his research could be uncovered. But wait a minute, something was about to go down. In 1955, the United States Space Agency, NACA, no, not NASA, NACA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, recorded an anomalous energy surge in Southern California. The electromagnetic readings were like nothing NACA had ever seen before. Immediately, these findings were reported to then President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who dispatched the FBI, CIA, and the military security forces to descend on Southern California and investigate these mysterious energy surges. The investigation into the energy surges finally provided a break in the case. Strange spatial irregularities flooded the area. Gravity seemed to not work quite as gravity should work in that area. And positively charged particles scientists classified as tachyon particles, which until this point was only a theoretical possibility, but here they were permeating the area. Within the sea of tachyon particles hid another unexpected treasure, exposed for the first time since World War II, the long-lost Nazi bell. It was evident that out of all the stories and conspiracy theories surrounding the Nazi bell, at least one was correct. With the area highly irradiated by tachyon particles, the particles that scientists closely associated with time travel, we could now say that the Nazi bell was a fully functional time travel device. A time machine! The bell looked to be damaged, and upon closer examination, its technology cannibalized. But the hopes was still to discover how this thing worked. But the quest was still on to find the mastermind behind the development of the bell. But that quest wouldn't take long. You see, upon examination of the interior of the bell, a curious discovery was made. The pilot seemed to drop his wallet in his haste to cannibalize the craft and flee before the authorities could catch up to him. That's right, Planeteers. Super genius who developed a fully functional time machine pulled off a masterful exit from 1945 as Germany was falling to the Allies, ripped all of his time travel technology out of the bell before the authorities arrived in 1955, but somehow forgot to grab his wallet. And there it was, right there on his German driver's license. The mystery scientist had a name, and his name was Dr. Emmett von Braun from Wolfsburg, Germany. Using the photo image on the driver's license, the FBI sprang immediately into action to uncover who this man actually was. Utilizing the facial recognition software of 1950s, photos, it was quickly surmised that Dr. Emmett von Braun was indeed an SS Gestapo scientist during World War II and regarded amongst his peers as a technical innovator with wild-eyed radical scientific ideas, including time travel and artificial intelligence. Now that Dr. von Braun had arrived in 1955, he needed to find a way to keep a low profile or persona that would not draw attention to himself, while he continued his life work in scientific research. But throughout 1955, Multiple spatial displacements had occurred in Southern California, centered around the city of Hill Valley, with both positively and negatively charged tachyon particles present. This led top scientists and investigators to conclude that there was only one thing possible, and that was multiple time travel incursions were happening in and around Hill Valley, California, both going to the future and to the past. The FBI, during the time these temporal incursions were happening, realized that there was one resident of Hill Valley that might not be who he claimed to be, as there was no record of him prior to 1955. A recluse scientist focused solely on his work with an eccentric reputation as a failed inventor. His name was Dr. Emmett Brown. Suspicions in hand, the FBI moved in on the residence of Dr. Brown, but alas, as the FBI entered, it was evident that Doc Brown was nowhere to be found. His workshop in shambles, his notes scattered. It would appear that Doc Brown had done it again and pulled off a miraculous escape. But wait a minute. During this escape, the good doctor had done something he hadn't done during his last escape. This time, he left some scientific research behind, focusing on the development of artificial intelligence, giving federal law enforcement a clue as to what to potentially look for from the good doctor. But alas, despite a nationwide search effort, Dr. Emmett Brown once again disappeared from history. That is, we believe, until 1968. Strange reports started coming out of San Francisco, California in 1968 about this strange little car, a Volkswagen Beetle, boasting a big number 53 across its front end that would take to the streets of San Francisco, seemingly driving itself. This car caught the attention of the feds as they raced to San Francisco to try and retrieve this self-driving car. But easier said than done. That car just didn't drive itself. It was a sentient, semi-anthropomorphic entity that had a passion for entering car races. It could think, it could communicate, it was cunning, and it possessed a desire for self-preservation. In the mind of the feds, it was a danger to humanity. After a number of chases around San Francisco and a couple of trips around the racetrack, the sentient Beetle was indeed captured. With the Beetle now in the hands of the FBI, top scientists were brought in to analyze the little car. The first thing that they discovered was the primary function of the car and its designation. The Beetle's official designation was the Heavily Equipped Roving Battle Intelligent Evolution, or just Herbie for short. Herbie appeared to be developed as an independently thinking battle bot. Despite what was uncovered within the highly advanced artificial intelligence programs that seemed to have evolved beyond their original program, it would seem that Herbie was a prototype, a one-of-a-kind invention, a prototype that had an ability to be expanded or improved. An invention that Dr. Emmett Brown's fingerprints had all over it when scientists analyzing Herbie compared his technological developments with the artificial intelligence notes that were seized at the residence of Dr. Emmett Brown in 1955. But in the end, the finality of Dr. Brown's plan came to fruition in 1984, and it was on horrifying display for all the world to see. Because what was happening in 1984 was a series of multiple time displacements occurring simultaneously across the globe. And what was emerging from these temporal displacements were fully automated, next-generation sentient robots with a singular focus to terminate man, eradicate the strong, enslave the weak. Doc Brown had returned from the year 2029 with an army of cyborg assassins to build a new and better society on planet Earth with his vision in mind. In 1984, Earth was unprepared for the devastation that these cyborg assassins could inflict. In a last-ditch effort, the war-torn humans went so far as to hand-to-hand combat with these war machines, but to no avail. Ultimately, humanity fell. A new dark age of Earth had been ushered in with the rise of the machines, creating a one-world order under the rule of Dr. Emmett Brown. Now, looking back on these events that have transpired, along with fragmented documents and research that had been found by the last remnants of man, it is believed that Dr. von Braun escaped Germany in 1945 by traveling to the future of 1955. Once there, it is highly theorized that once he changed his identity to Dr. Emmett Brown, he realized he was trapped in 1955, since the vehicle that brought him there was no longer functional. The only plausible explanation that would help us understand the events that followed was that the older version of Dr. Brown from the future traveled back in time to 1955 in a completed and fully functional second time machine, constructed into possibly a souped-up DeLorean. He then gave his younger version of himself in 1955 the fully functional time machine that 1955 Dr. Brown used to escape to 1968 and then to 2029 to develop his AI time-traveling cyborg army, which was then used to take back through time to the year 1984 and conquer humanities. And there you have it, Planeteers, our messed up mirror history that could or could not happen. Let us know what you think. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching, and thank you very much, Planeteers, for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like and a share. Please subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to smash that bell for alerts. If there are sci-fi topics you would like to hear about or chat about on our channel, please be sure to leave a comment below. We can also be found across social media, so please visit us on our social media sites to check out the latest and greatest happenings in the Planeteer galaxy. We can be found on Twitter at Sci-Fi More, on Instagram at Sci-Fi and More, and on Facebook at Mike Cosmos, Sci-Fi and More. Until next time, Planeteers, have a great day.